A very big hello to everyone joining us today. My name is Arbaz Hashmi, and on behalf of Empower Financing, I'd like to welcome all of you to our session on COVID 19 and its impact on the fall 21 intake for Canada. To be honest, these are very unprecedented times for which no one was prepared, actually. And so much has changed during this pandemic. At Empower alone, we have received thousands of queries from aspiring students with their concern regarding the future journeys to Canada, to US, to all the other countries, and it just made so much sense to organize a space where the students can get the right info about what's certain about their journey ahead, what's not, what do they need to watch out for, and Vince Kakavo, our speaker for the day, was kind enough to agree to host this session with us. A former international student to Canada himself, he has helped multiple students to realize their educational dreams for Canada in the past, and he's still doing so. Something that he'll talk about in his time in his presentation with us. And I'll not take much time and dive right into the agenda for the day. We have about like 60 minutes with us for this webinar. The first half will be about Vince taking us through the insights, and the next 30 minutes will be where he'll be answering all the questions that you all might have. Right? I hope all is set. Vince, over to you now. I'm going to make you the presenter for the day, and you can share your screen with the awesome presentation that you prepared. Right.
Thank you, Arbaz, for having me here today. And good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Vince Kakavo, and I'm very happy today to be sharing the next hour with you and hopefully to provide some clarification on what is going on in Canada and how is the impact of COVID-19 been on the admissions for Canadian institutions for fall 2020 and 2021. Before we get started, I will be running through my agenda for the day. So I'm just going to have a brief introduction about myself and my company, and then we're going to dive right into it, and we'll discuss how has Canada been tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. What are some of the steps Canadian universities have taken to adapt to the new situation? Will the competition increase for 2021 intake because of the deferment, and are scholarships still an option? What to expect in the application process during the pandemic? Canadian job market during COVID-19, new visa process for international students, resources that students can use in their application process. And then we're going to have a Q&A session where hopefully I can provide some further clarification on your many questions and doubts that I'm sure you guys have. Okay, so let's get started. My name is Vincenzo Cascavo. I'm an international student from Italy, and I've been ambassador for international students at the University of Windsor for about 3 years. Afterwards, I founded this company called Studiare in Canada. It's an Italian-based international recruiting company that aims to support international students in their journey to Canada and hopefully like soon North American institutions. Again, as a former international student, I feel for every one of you, and I hope I can be of help in your process, in your journey. After this presentation, please feel free to connect with me. We can definitely discuss many things about the journey in Canada, from the inception and onto your choice of like the university, the program, and how to navigate these very difficult times. MPOWER Financing is my partner, and together we aim to, improve this whole process where students can access universities and at the same time obtain the financing needed to attend such universities. Let's get started with the presentation. So first of all, how has Canada been tackling the COVID-19 pandemic? First of all, guys, we need to provide some clarification regarding the difference between the US and Canada. So these two countries have been approaching the pandemic in a very drastic or different way. Canada today has about 120,000 cases, and the Canadian government has closed the borders as early as March 21st. Now, there is 14 days mandatory quarantine in place since March, but it's still in place. And of course, like both workplaces and educational institutions have provided remote solutions for their workers and students. So whenever like you think and you want to know like what is happening in Canada, well, like most likely you will have to quarantine if you decide to travel at this time. This is like the sure thing in place until at least like 220. For 221, there are still many questions that unfortunately it will be very hard to answer just because, you know, it's a rolling basis and we're just waiting to see how the curve will be changing in the next few months. To give you guys an idea of like how Canada has been handling and tackling the pandemic, the Canadian government has provided some relief package, economic relief package for international people, both workers and students. You can see the names in the presentation. One of them is the CERB, so the Canada Emergency Response Benefit Plan. The other one is the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit Plan. Both plans were directed not only to Canadian citizens, but also to international people, both workers and students. This is just to give you an idea of how well the Canadian government has been supporting, thankfully, international people during this time. So throughout this pandemic, we have received all the means and the tools to get through this very tough months. And as of today, we can still count on such measures. For any one of you wondering, the Canadian border with the US, it's currently closed until at least 2021. Again, this is because, you know, Canada is a border country with the US, and unfortunately, like the situation does not allow these two countries now to interact with each other, which means that if you were looking into, for example, flying to the US and then eventually getting into Canada, this won't be possible at this time. When it comes to strictly traveling to Canada, whether you guys have an approved visa or you were able for some reason to travel to Canada, most likely you will need to have a 14 days quarantine plan to show exactly what you will be doing in those 14 days and how you will be getting through those 14 days in terms of like groceries or any other basic need that you may have. So this is just kind of like overall like what Canada has been doing in the past few months. Moving on, what are some of the steps Canadian universities have taken to adapt to this new situation? This maybe like is not going to sound like different from many other countries, but Canada has been shifted. Canadian universities have been shifting their courses online. Some universities also have thought about hybrid solutions, which pretty much means having both courses online and in classroom components. This means that according to the university and the specific course you're looking at, you might have an hybrid class, which means you might be able to go in a class if it's a lab, for example. So clearly this happens specifically for those specialized programs that require students to be in class and therefore to run specific tasks. But overall, you'll find spread everywhere in Canada that no universities have in person until at least 2021. Some Canadian universities have open campus spaces with mandatory mask wearing and social distancing measures. This is like nationwide measure where students are mandated to wear masks, of course, like around campuses. Some universities and colleges have shifted to an essential services model only. This means that you won't be able pretty much to most likely have office hours with your professors when you get started with university, but most likely everything will be held online because the staff will be working remotely. Again, this is a case-by-case situation. So it depends where the university you're looking at is located. It depends what measures that specific university has been taking for their students and how they're adapting to this situation. I'm just like speaking like very generally, but this is overall like the line in which Canadian universities have been acting on in the past few months. Finally, dorms and campuses have been closed. When I mean campuses, I mean, of course, like public spaces in campuses have been closed through the end of 2021, which means that you will have to look for an accommodation outside of campus. So the dorms at this time are not available. which is, like usually for us international students, the first year in dorms, it's very common. And, like it's unfortunate, it's very unfortunate, but this is what the regulation is for the time being. Hopefully for September 2021, we can assist to like openings of dorms back up. So that's my wish for all my students, and of course, like for you guys, in case you decide to undergo this journey. This is just a map showing like how Canada just aligns to many other countries in terms of like countrywide school closures. So as you can see, like the system is very different, as I was mentioning before, with the US. US have had more like localized school closures, which means that in some parts of the US, you should still find some open schools. But in Canada, you won't find open schools, but all schools that have shifted their system online or in a hybrid format, pretty much. And again, this is true for Ontario, like it is for Quebec, or on the West Coast, like in British Columbia, like the regulations are pretty much all the same. And, the number of cases are well balanced between West and East, I would say. Will the competition increase for the 2021 intake because of the deferment? Now, this is a very common question I've been having, especially like for the students interested in starting September 2020. The answer to this question is yes. Most likely, a lot of students that were looking to apply into fall, so like September 2020, they will be applying in September 2021. We, as Studiare in Canada, are anticipating a record number of applications for higher education intake of 2021. The process will be slightly like high competitive because, like many students, of course, like have changed their mind in terms of like where to go, when to start, and of course, like whether, Canada was the right fit for them or not. But like 2021 is definitely the date in which everyone is looking at for beginning of the classes. Our suggestion for the students is to apply early, which means that if you already have your mind clear on what you wish to study, if you already have a clear picture, like the university and the course specifically that you're looking at, I would suggest to start the application right away, because the application at this time in Canada, at least like most universities, are on a rolling basis. Means applications are reviewed on a first come, first served basis. Guys, this pretty much means that the earlier you apply, the higher chances you have that your application will be totally reviewed and accepted. So the later you apply, the more chances you have that someone else already got your spot. And that's because, again, competition will be higher, of course. There's going to be much more students applying. And that's why, like, it's very important. I cannot stress this enough. Try to start the application process as early as you can in order to, like at least being considered and ensure yourself like a spot within the program and the university of your wish. Are scholarships still an option? Now, regarding the scholarship, guys, like we have to make like a distinction between two different types of scholarships. There is the entrance scholarship, which is granted to every international student, and they reported an example here. For example, the University of Windsor in Ontario, they offer a 10,000 renewable entrance scholarship. That means that you're looking at $1,250 every semester per like 8 semesters. You qualify for the entrance scholarship if you're coming off high school with at least like a 95% average. And you have to maintain 85% average as a full-time student throughout your undergraduate degree. Again, this is like a pre-pandemic measure, like the entrance scholarship hasn't changed, and you can expect to obtain the entrance scholarship when you apply. What is different will be the extraordinary scholarships. Now, this means that like when you fill in the application, the university will match you if you do qualify with a scholarship available. Some other universities may require you guys to apply directly to the scholarships of your interest, but most likely they will match you. Now, the earlier you apply, the higher chances you have to be matched with that scholarship and obtain the scholarship. Because the later you apply, it might be possible that even though you qualify, you won't get it because someone else applied earlier than you. So timing in this situation is very important, and it's very important to, being very thorough in the process to submit all the documents so that you can qualify for either the scholarships or the programs like you're applying for. Moving on. So what to expect in the application process during the pandemic? I'm sure like many of you guys have heard about, like, for example, standardized test course like the GMAT, the impossibility of writing such exams. I'm sure like you read about many universities waiving such scores, waiving like such scores like for admission requirements to their program. Again, this is on a case by case like situation, which means that every university behaves in a different way. Some university, for example, decided to waive the GMAT, which means that due to the impossibility to write the test, although again, like now the situation has changed because you can write the GMAT online, but some universities have still in place the fact that you can enroll in, for example, an MBA program, and they waive the GMAT just for this like time span of the pandemic. Now, of course, they will put much more emphasis on other documents. So if the GMAT won't be a requirement, you can expect to be having much more emphasis on essays, personal statements, reference letters. So the application will need to be much more professionally written when you guys go there and apply. Again, it's a case by case situation. There is no general statement or rule. It really depends on the university. And unfortunately, the situation is changing and evolving. And, we can expect to have news like every month on how they decided to change, one particular requirement over another. Overall, we can say that the English tests like the IELTS or the TOEFL are still mandatory. So you need to be satisfying the English requirements in order to enroll in both undergrad and graduate programs, unless you choose to go for an ESL, so English as a second language program. Every university offers one of these classes. And again, it's still an option for you to choose. But again, overall, like the English requirement is still mandatory for every university, unless you come from an English-speaking high school or university. So like an international, pretty much high school or university. Another and last point about the application process, universities have granted more admissions rounds and the deadlines have been extended. That's because they understand the situation. They understand that unfortunately many offices both in Canada and in your own countries are closed due to the pandemic. And that's why they try to meet the student needs by extending the deadlines and offering more rounds of application. Again, this is synonym of a higher competition. Don't forget that. And keep in mind, that applications will need to be extremely thorough, like in the new application process. Like there's going to be much more emphasis on things that, sometimes students overlook this kind of documents, but this time, like essays, personal statements, reference letters, I cannot stress this enough. Make sure to prepare those very thoroughly. I'm going to give you like a just brief outlook on the Canadian job market during COVID-19, because, like the ultimate goal is, of course, like to either start to have an work experience in Canada, or, eventually even deciding to stay. So Canada has had an unemployment rate during the pandemic of about 5.6%. There were about 3 million people expected to be out of job by the end of May. Again, these numbers shouldn't be scaring you, because again, it's been spread all over the world, this pandemic, and unfortunately the economy closed down in Canada, like in the US or in Europe or in any other Arab or Asian countries. So just make sure to keep this in mind. Unfortunately, the economic climate will be tough for every one of us. The GDP is expected to contract 0.7% in 2020 and 2.3% in 2021. meaning that we should be expecting a recovery in between 8 months and 1 year. So again, many of you, if you're starting in 221, most likely you should be having the opportunity to enroll in a co-op program, because again, it's very important, to choose whether you want to participate or not in the co-op program offered by a university. And given the time where we're at, it becomes a bit like uncertain to find a placement. But I know of many universities that adapted their co-op programs to work remotely and to still gain the credits that you need to qualify for the co-op requirements. Again, we will be facing a tough economic climate, but the curve is expected to improve and the economy will recover within 8 months to 1 year. Again, there are questions we cannot answer, of course, right now, but there are many good analysts out there doing a great job in forecasting the trends for 2021 and 2022. Moving on, this is just like a short graph about the different sectors, how they've been hit in the world, but in Canada as well. Of course, like retail, manufacturing. In Canada, like finance is very dominant in terms of like market shares, and the exposure has been it's been pretty rough for Canadian banks as well. And again, all the students graduating in finance have had a very hard time to find placements within the co-op, or they've been deferred, they've been canceled. Unfortunately, again, it's true for any field. There is really like no way to avoid this. Like it's spread from the engineering sector to the computer science or social sciences. Everything is unfortunately on hold. But as I mentioned before, like things should get better hopefully within like 8 months to 1 year. New visa process for international students. Now I have to have like here a premise for this part. I cannot provide visa counseling for students. I will just be sharing information that are publicly available and you guys can read on like from the Canadian government website or other sources that I will show you like after the next few slides. So I'm just, we're going to go through and I will briefly explain some of these points. So the new measures for the visa process for international students include providing priority study permit processing for applicants who have submitted a complete application online. This is, of course, like for everyone who does the application in an online format and on a paper-based format. Allowing students to count time spent in online studies abroad towards their eligibility for a post-graduation work permit, so long as they have submitted the study permit application and at least 50% of their program of study is completed in Canada. This is a very important point, guys, because this means that you are able still to obtain the post-graduation work permit, which is the permit you achieve after the study permit, and it's a 3-year permit that usually you need like the full completion of the studies, undergrad or graduate degree. This is pretty much saying that you will be able to still obtain the post-graduation work permit even if you complete the beginning part of your studies online, as long as you submit an application for the study permit. So this is very important. It means that you can start to study in your own country online. And once you are able to move to Canada, you will be able to actually finish your study and obtain still the postgraduate work permit. So that part of your journey will not be affected. And finally, implementing a new 2-stage approval process for students who cannot submit all of the documentation needed for a complete study permit application. For example, any biometric requirements. Again, refer to the Canadian government website for more information, but this pretty much means, and I will explain what this new process is, 2-stage process. Like in this like situation, you will be able to pretty much still qualify for an early approval. And they try to meet your needs, such as, for example, submitting the biometrics, because they know that the offices in many countries today are closed, and therefore you won't be able to provide your biometrics to the Canadian consulate or embassy like in your own country. To explain what it is, the new two-stage approval process. What the IRCC, so the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, says about the process. This is literally like from like the Canadian government website. So applicants who pass the approval in principle stage, which includes showing that they've been accepted at a Canadian learning institution, which means pretty much, guys, the acceptance letter. So once you receive the acceptance letter from the university, have the available funds and are otherwise eligible for the study permit, will be notified of a first step approval. So this means that as long as you have the letter of acceptance from the university, you have the approval available funds, which, like a company, for example, MPOWER, can easily provide to you if you apply to their loan, and are otherwise eligible for the study permit. So once you go through the study permit application, you do qualify as an individual able to obtain a study permit. So you will be obtaining a first stage approval. Once the approval in principle is issued, applicants can begin studying online abroad, and at that time count towards their post-graduation work permit, provided they meet other criteria and that they eventually receive full approval of their study permit. So this pretty much means that you can start studying online to the designated university you chose. And again, like this, the time you spend in your own country studying will count towards the postgraduate work permit. This is what we were saying like earlier on, while you are waiting and to receive like full approval of your study permit. So here it is where the first stage is. There is a first early stage with just few documents, and then you move on and overall like complete your application eventually and obtain the study permit. An applicant will receive a final approval once they have met all eligibility and admissibility requirements, including submitting biometrics and necessary documents such as immigration, medical exam, and the police certificate. Only once a final approval is received will an applicant be able to travel to Canada. Again, this is the completion of the second stage. This means that you have been able to provide your biometrics, you've been able to provide your medical examination and the police certificate. And, at that point, like you will be notified of the second stage approval. And at that point, you will be able to enter Canada because you will have the documentation needed to pass the border. So this is it for the application process. Again, unfortunately, there is nothing much I can say about this. Just explaining you point by point what it is publicly available. I strongly suggest you to check the government sources about this. They're very clear, they're very precise, and you can be updated like of any changes because there are many changes happening, unfortunately, this time. And finally, this is just, guys, like something useful for you. When you navigate and you look for more information regarding, where to look for, for example, the scholarships or the visas or specific like university updates, I would strongly suggest you to like choose carefully your sources. The Canadian government website, I reported the link for you guys right below here. It's an amazing source of information for anything, any question, any topic you have about immigration in Canada, even university. And the other source is EduCanada website. EduCanada website is extremely resourceful, and they have continue like updatings about what is going on with international students, like requirements and changes in the process for us and the application process. Finally, you can choose, of course, to talk to a recognized and specialized organization that can provide support about the whole range of services. This is like, for example, what myself with MPOWER do. We support, students in this journey and to navigate like these very uncertain times. Again, choose carefully your sources because, and again, like just to stress one more time, like the most important concept, like the situation is very case-based. Like you need to look specifically into the university of your interest and in the program of your interest. Because one university most likely is not behaving like another one, which means that like you might be needing a GMAT for one, but for another one, for a certain time lapse or for a few months, you might be able to apply even without like one of these standardized tests. And yeah, so like this is it for like my presentation. I will be leaving you guys my email address if anyone wants to reach out after the presentation for specific questions about universities or like anything else that I did not clarify or that we're not going to be able to cover in the Q&A session. Please feel free to reach out to me. And again, thank you so much for your attention and interest in studying in Canada. And I guess we can move on the Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Vince. Thanks a lot for that really insightful presentation. I have a few questions here the students have actually asked. So the first one says that have the cutoff scores for these standardized tests, have they been affected in any way? For example, somebody who has previously received an IELTS score of 6.5 band, will the new times mean that an older times pre-corona 6.5 would now be equivalent to a 7.5 because of the high competition, or what is your opinion on that?
Well, like usually, like about the specific scores, I'm pretty sure they're still in place, which means that universities usually wouldn't be lowering the scores or putting the scores like on a higher scale. I think they will be relying much more on the rolling base model, which means that first come, first serve. The scores will still be the same, but the earlier you apply, the higher chances that you have to get into that specific program. The only other thing I could say is that they would rather eliminate the barrier of having to take the test rather than lowering or putting the score higher. Again, this is the measures we are seeing now for the 220 admission. For 221, it will be highly dependent on the curve of cases like going on in Canada. Because again, like they might be choosing to higher the requirements in terms of like even the scores. And at that point, that becomes a barrier for some students, but don't worry because the deadlines have been extended and there's going to be more application rounds. So in case that happens, you can always retry the test and try to score what is needed.
Got it. Understood. And another thing, so now that you mentioned that, as soon as possible, a student needs to make up their mind and, apply to that particular college that they want to go for. So has the timeline for that application journey moved in any way, whether it has moved further down the year or maybe moved up a little bit? Has that changed in any sense?
Actually, it's been made like a bit even longer because you will be able, most likely if you go on any university website right now and try to enroll in some specific programs, most likely you'll find some applications already open for the 221 intake. That's because universities understand the issue that the students are facing at this time. So I think that the timeline hasn't really changed for September 2021. It's been extended. So you will be finding many more dates to use. And it's up to the students now to choose when to start the application, because the application process does not take 2 days. It's, like a process that covers like a longer timeline, especially now where many offices are closed. So no, I wouldn't say it's been drastically affected. I would say it's been extended.
Got it. So we have Daniel here who has asked a question. What if one graduates from the US and want to study for masters in Canada? Is there a separate process or separate timeline or separate consideration that they need to keep in mind? Or is it something that it would be considered the same way as the rest of the international students?
Well, like US students have a different treatment compared to normal like international students, as in like students coming from outside the US and Canada. Usually the rates are different if the student is a US citizen. But no, when it comes to the actual application, there is no favoring like treatment for U.S. students over like international students. To be honest, like the application process is pretty fair when it comes to the selection. The GPA is what really matters. The references that you can provide, those really matters. So as long as you provide strong references, whether they come from a U.S. university or an international university, the treatment won't be different, but very equal in the selection process.
Understood. Got it. And so since also you mentioned that there is a high competition that's going to be for the fall 21 intake, and there are a number of students who actually, they don't really have a any sort of a work experience to their profile. They've just done their undergraduate, and now they're thinking for an education in the Canada. So will these students have a, I don't know, maybe some sort of a disadvantage compared to the ones who would be applying with WorkX?
Well, like if we're talking about undergraduate students, no, I wouldn't say no. Like I think that really depends on the university and the size of the university, because unfortunately some universities reach capacity very quickly. Classes tend to be a bit like bigger in, especially like in undergrad. So again, the admissions for those classes will still be pretty like, fair even for the undergrad students with no work experience because of the many spots available. I know that they are trying to split up those classes into many different sessions where professors will run more sessions for September 2021, of course, like more sessions instead of like one big session with like 200-300 students in the class. Again, work experience counts if you are trying to go for a more competitive university, like if you're targeting, like, for example, University of Toronto or Western, the Ivy League. So if you're targeting the Ivy League, yes, like maybe the competition will require you to have a very high GPA. That's what matters the most in undergrad, and maybe some work experience, yes. But if you're targeting the other universities, it's more the timing in which you apply. The earlier, the better to secure the spot and the scholarships.
Understood. Got it. There's a question that came here from, I think, Jyoti from India. She says that she's applying for 21, and you mentioned there are a number of things about, like, with the essays and the as early to apply in the journey. At the same time, make sure that the essays are really good and really express for one's personality. Are there any other tips or resources that you can give and provide to all of the attendees here about meeting that competition, that particular competition for 2021?
Absolutely. Well, like regarding, first of all, the references, guys, try to have professional references. Again, this set of like documents is required for master programs, which means that most likely if you are applying for one of the programs in Canada that are very competitive themselves, you either have like strong work experience or you already attended like an undergraduate degree. Make sure to have references, like, for example, out of three, two professors from your university, someone maybe you work with, and then like a former employer. It's very important, their references are, truthful and reflect even more who you are, especially this time. It's very important to present yourself in a way that, it's very clear for the admission panel to understand who you are based on a document, because you have to understand they won't have time to go through thousands of applications that they are receiving. So the documents you're submitting have to be very, very effective. About the essays, there are many resources online. Even like my organization, like we can help you out with your essay, like for any tips on how to be more personal and more, like more approachable, and how like to structure it properly. So reference letters, essays, and the personal statement. Personal statement, again, it has to be reflecting your mission. Again, these are very documents that should be reflecting your inner self. And that's why, like, sometimes some students think that they can write this in like a couple hours. Take your time. You have time now. It's summer. Like, make sure to dedicate like some few days to really think about why you want some specific course and why that university and why you think you will be a great candidate for that specific role. Like just spend more time and ask to us or Empower to receive help. We would be very happy to help you with any of these documents.
Understood. Got it. We have so there are other students, there's certain people who are actually thinking of migrating to Canada, right, and apply for an express entry program. But I think a fair bit of belief that has been there is that if anybody who wishes to migrate, or maybe eventually plan to have a long term stay in Canada, they should go through an education route, and that is the easiest way to apply for an employment, or maybe get a long term stay over there. So for the experienced professionals, and because they would be leaving a job that they have in their home countries, and then applying for an education, and getting that education in for about 1 or 2 years, is currently a right time for them to take that step, or should they wait for another 1 or 2 years, considering the whole I know that you said that the economy would recover by that time, but there is still a factor with them, because they would be leaving a job and then going for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's a tough spot for sure. My personal experience is that I moved to Canada when I was 19 from Italy. And again, like after 4 years degree, I have been facing like a pretty tough time myself in Canada. It's not that easy to navigate the job market there, but it's definitely a very wide job market that allows everyone to succeed and to find the right opportunity. This specific time is very singular. I believe that if you're considering about September 2021, most likely master programs are at around like 1 year, 2 years length. So we're looking to finishing in like about like 222/223. So you might be going with the flow of the recovery, and you might get lucky and find a job right away. Again, you have work experience, and that's very valuable. Canadians value a lot the international experience that many of us have in any field, whether it is engineering or it is finance. Like they value our experience a lot. So again, it's tough to say if waiting for 1 year would be the better option, but you have to consider that you're taking this year to apply and to fill in all the documents, starting in 2021 September, taking another year to study, maybe two, and that's going to go into 2023. By then, we are expecting to be in the process of the recovery, which again, it's going to take time, but you should be going with the wave of the recovery. It's unfortunately, it's a very, very top spot, leaving a job for, like a radical change in your life. Personally, I benefited from this. I could have stayed in Italy, but I decided to go to Canada looking for the better opportunity. And I do believe that there are better opportunities, but this is my experience. And so that's what I can say. It's worth giving a shot. Your job might be still back there if you're able to leverage, this Canadian experience with your employer back home. So in case you find nothing, you might be able to go back home and go back to the job you had. This is as much as I can advise about this matter.
Got it. And so Timilehin Emmanuel has asked a question that is there a possibility that for 21 intake, the tuition fees for Canadian universities be reduced, or any sort of a fluctuation that we can hope to see?
This has been a big question, to be honest. Like I got this question from many students that, try to ask me, if the university is online, are we going to pay less? As of today, I know that universities have not changed their thoughts about tuition reduction. Actually, I've seen an increase in some universities. It's something they're not considering at this time. Maybe they still have to adjust and adapt to the situation. So maybe in the next year, if they will see a drastic reduction in international students attending, they might be lowering tuition. But again, it's something that they're still exploring. Like the guidelines are very unclear when it comes down to the university themselves. Like everyone is behaving, yes, in a similar manner, but they all have different plans. So unfortunately, we might see in a month a university saying, okay, well, international students will be paying 50% reduction in tuition as long as their studies are online. But for the time being, this is not in place. for the time being, you're paying the full tuition if you enroll in any of these courses.
But thank you so much, all of you, for being with us here today. Thank you so much, Vince, for agreeing to host this session with us. I hope it helped all of you who were attending the webinar. And let's take it from here then. Thank you so much.